Okay, good afternoon or evening, and welcome to this event of this afternoon. I'm Bakumwa Hengari. I'm going to help direct the proceedings and moderate the discussion. Today we are marking the International Day in remembrance of genocides and the victims of the genocides, wherever they might have occurred. In Namibia, for us, it is particularly important to mark this day as we just went through a momentous year, 2021. Momentous in more than one respects, particularly if one looks at the last 7 months in which we were dealing with what would have been or what is purported to have been an agreement initialed through a joint declaration between the Republic of Namibia and the Federal Republic of Germany on what is said to be a reparations package for the victims of the 1904 to 1908 Ovaherero and Nama genocides. We would recall that one of the obvious low-hanging fruit in the process of trying to repair and or atone and or do whatever we can call to make amends with the damage that was done is the element of remembrance and memorialization is very, very important. That is why it is so saddening and is hardening to note that this year, 5 years into the process that we were told was geared towards gaining recognition for the genocide from the Germans, gaining a process of atonement from the Germans, and ultimately gaining a process of restitution or reparation from the Germans. Here in Namibia, we still do not have a dedicated day of remembrance for the victims of that genocide. And this, one must add, is despite the fact that more than 4 years ago, this issue, if for the ensuing years after our independence, for whatever reason, it never dawned on our government that this is a process that must be had or must be taken. 4 years ago, there was a motion in our parliament, followed by an elaborate process of community consultation on a possible genocide remembrance day in Namibia. And I think, if I am not mistaken, through consultation, the date of May 28 was tentatively pointed as the preferred date. It's a very important date, the 28th of May, because that was the symbolic end of the incarceration of our people in concentration camps. But to date, as I said, we don't have that. So that is why, as the Ovaherero and Ovambaderu Genocide Foundation, we deemed it important to come and reflect on this reparation, this joint declaration. Reflect on it in terms of some of the key legal instruments. One is called Transitional Justice. The other one is Restorative Justice. The two are essentially twins. I don't want to go into that. We have John Nakuta, who is going to take the lead in that. And then we have our sister Esther. And obviously then they would be followed by our grandmother, the Andy of the Namibian Genocide and Resistance Movement, Honorable Ita. And then we have other 3 panelists my younger brothers, Stephen Rau in Botswana, and my younger brother and cousin, Thabo Apollos in South Africa, as well as Komo Mushiwa from the UK. So let me not dwell too much into this. I don't want to eat into what our panelists have got to do. When I get an opportunity, I'll come and say a bit more. But now, let me invite Advocate John Nakuta to take us through the first part of the presentation. John.
You must explain to me how it works. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Whilst we're waiting for him to take me through my presentation, let me just introduce myself. My name is John Nakuta. Can I take this off?
Yes, please.
Okay. Yeah, as I was saying, my name is John Nakuta. I'm a full-time law lecturer at the University of Namibia, but I've got also many other hats. I'm also the media ombudsman for Namibia, and I'm an ally of the cause that we are discussing today. Is my presentation ready? So just a minute whilst we're waiting for the presentation to reflect. Where is it? Can't you? My sincere apologies for that. I was asked to talk about the reconciliation agreement and to critique it from a rights-based perspective, and obviously also from a restorative justice perspective. And that is what I'm going to do with the few slides that I'm having. Can someone please organize that for me then? So I've titled, can you quickly go back? I've titled my topic, the reconciliation agreement with a question as why does it matter? Again, from a human rights and restorative justice point of view. Next slide, please. Just about the author, very quickly. I normally do it every time when I'm addressing an audience like this. Just to make a point, the point that was made by Martin Luther Jr. Apparently he wrote a letter from the Birmingham jail, and he said the following: "An injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." I'm mentioning this because, as I'm saying, I'm not one of the affected communities. I'm not from the Overherero community. I'm not from the Nama community. But I'm a strong proponent and a believer in what Martin Luther King is saying, the question of justice. And that's why I agreed to participate in today's discussion. The next slide, please. I want to start by reflecting very briefly, by way of background, on Germany's denialism. It started at the very beginning, where Germany outrightly denied that genocide occurred. And then they changed their tune, and now they are saying the vile acts that were committed during their reign, particularly between 1904 and 1908, must now be viewed from today's perspective, thereby effectively invoking what we call the intertemporal doctrine of international law. Simply saying something that occurred way back in 1904 should be resolved with the laws that were in place at the time when it occurred, and not by today's laws and whatever. By so doing, Germany is therefore evading legal liability for the genocidal acts that were committed during the period under review. And for that reason, the reconciliation agreement avoids the minimum legal principles and standard. And for that reason, the reconciliation agreement is flawed. And I'm going to elaborate a little bit more. Next slide, please. I want to start, and I'm not going to go into, but I want to make the point that way back in 2006, as we all know, our National Assembly adopted a motion, and that motion was unambiguous in terms of what must happen. 4 key things: that what happened to the Namas and the Overherero people during 1904 and 1908 was unambiguously genocide, sanctioned by the then German government of the day. It went further, as you know, that the Namas and Hereros are entitled by right to reparations, that the Namibian government should be an interested party in any discussions between its nationals and the German government on the issue, once again, of reparations. That dialogue be convened on the one hand between the Namibian government and representatives of the victim communities, and on the other hand, the German government. That motion, as I'm saying, is very clear, unambiguous, and this is what was supposed to happen. The next slide. However, the reconciliation agreement, as I said, is flawed for various reasons. One, amongst others, but these are the ones that I failed to mention, that the reconciliation agreement is not reflective of the mandate given way back in 2006. That the GRN negotiating team seems to have ignored the National Assembly's mandate as captured in the motion. The reconciliation agreement, as we all know, is conspicuously silent on the issue of reparations. The reconciliation agreement is not framed, therefore, in reparatory language. It also does not acknowledge and frame any genocidal acts which occurred during the period. For that reason, it evades, as I said, legal liability from any criminal acts that were conducted back then. Disturbingly, the reconciliation agreement, instead of talking about reparations, as was mandated by the motion, talks about development assistance. In other words, it conflates reparations with development assistance. And I'm saying it is really questionable the skill set of the Namibia negotiating team for them not to have seen that the reconciliation agreement does not reflect the given mandate is really questionable from my point of view. The next slide. I said to myself, I know we are different people, so I don't want to take much time. I've got specific messages for 4 categories of parties. The first one is to the German government. Professor Zimmer from Germany captures the current position of Germany during the past negotiations as follows. And I want to quote him. The German position was accepted. In other words, the German position with reference to the negotiations now. The German position was accept our offer or go away empty-handed. And that, in terms of Professor Zimmer, is the opposite of colonialization. Germany negotiates on the handling of colonial crimes of violence and genocide as if it were negotiating fishing quotas in Brussels. No holes are barred, and you try and rip the other side off. Professor Zimmer is saying that is completely inappropriate given the nature of the matter at stake. I don't need to say anything further other than saying, Germany, with all due respect, your position that you have taken sucks. You are a perpetrator and not a victim. You cannot dictate what must happen and what must be accepted. Lastly, with regard to this, it is actually very concerning that this kind of attitude of Germany seems to be accepted by the Namibian government. Because if one has regard to what the Minister Kapofi said, he said, and I'm paraphrasing, we cannot be sure that Germany would be willing to renegotiate because of this attitude. And we are saying the Namibian government cannot have such a kind of attitude also with regard to the negotiations. The next slide. I'm going quickly through this. To the Namibian government, the message is very clear. Depoliticize the reparation issue. Demonstrate political maturity. Don't see the whole reparation thing as a legacy project. Reconstitute a representative negotiating team consistent with the 2006 National Assembly motion. Very importantly, capacitate your negotiating team. Also very importantly, negotiate full and effective reparations. And from a legal point of view, when we talk about reparations, we are not just talking about compensation. Reparations include restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, and a guarantee of non-reparation. It is very clear from those 5 key subcomponents that reparations is not the same as development assistance. Thank you. The next one, the second last slide. We've got also a message very unambiguously to the National Assembly. And I'm asking my Namibian counterparts, maybe you know better than me. Was the reconciliation agreement withdrawn or was it rejected by the National Assembly? I honestly can't answer that question. We don't know. Is the outcome agreement supposed to be tabled in the National Assembly? In other words, if we go by the letter of the 2006 motion, a mandate is given to the executive, go and negotiate. And it presupposes that as the National Assembly delegates you to go and do something, you must come back and report back onto that. In terms of Minister Kapofi, it is not like this. And I'm again paraphrasing him. He's basically saying we didn't need to come and table the reconciliation agreement with you. We are basically doing you a favor. And we are saying to Kapofi, actually it's not. Because a delegatee, in this case, is subject to the repository of the mandate. If the mandate was or is in the hand of the National Assembly, and the National Assembly delegated the executive in form of the government to go and negotiate, it cannot be that the National Assembly dictate to Parliament as to what to do. That kind of dictation would be unlawful. And we are saying to the National Assembly, we are watching you. Yes, we don't know whether this thing is withdrawn or rejected, but we know it is it must be renegotiated. And we are saying it must come back to you. And we know from the High Court decision earlier this year that parliamentary decisions are not insulated from judicial scrutiny. So you better do the right thing, or otherwise we will challenge your decision. My last slide goes to the affected communities. And this is a question of, and I'm very careful in saying this, maybe it's about time that we also seriously consider, if we talk about restorative justice, then it's maybe about time whether we must think episodic or systemic rather. If we think episodic, then we confine it's supposed to be 1908. If we think episodic, then the whole reparation issue then is confined to the period 1904-1908. And that is exclusionary. However, if we think systemic, then we think holistically, in my opinion, and we look at the genocidal acts committed by German colonialism. In other words, we then say to ourselves that the genocidal acts committed by the German colonial government did not begin and it did not end with Van Trotter's extermination orders. And we think here about people like the San community that were hunted down long before the extermination order was given. Hunted down like animals. And also the Damara people that were also, they call themselves casualties of war. So shall we exclude people like this? And I'm not saying we should think the whole of Namibia. That is not what I'm saying, because we know German influence was more in the central and southern part of the country. But this is what we need to be thinking. Shall we exclude as affected communities people like the San and the Damaras? Lastly, if we talk restorative justice is saying crimes don't just affect the victim. It similarly also affects the offender. The fact that Germany cannot apologize is because they don't see that they've done something wrong. Because for them that was not a crime. And Germany needs also to be told and to be rehabilitated. But further, coming back to the question of restorative justice, communities are also affected. Communities, normal crime. Even if you were to beat your wife tonight, it is not just your wife that is affected. It is the community that is also affected. So lastly, to the affected communities, my appeal to you, by being exclusionary, you may be unwittingly reproducing colonial injustices. And I don't think this is what you want to do. With that, thank you very much.
Brilliant, brilliant. Shall we, I wanted to say, shall we give him a round of applause, but that might not be quite practical given the nature of the setup that we have today. In trying to understand where we are, the other day I was reading something. Is a report by the Rapporteur on Human Rights. He sent a report to the General Assembly of the United Nations. And one of the key things that I picked up in that is that states like ours, which became independent and were colonized and colonies, and now are independent, do have an obligation as well in terms of helping with what is termed transitional justice for the victims of colonial injustices, human rights, and the abuses that they suffered. It is in that context that this report, which was released on the 19th of July, 2021, highlights the agreement that my colleague John was just speaking to now. And one of the things that it notes is that the recent agreement, I'm just trying to quote it now, the recent agreement between Germany and Namibia includes acknowledgement of the genocide against Hereros and Namas, albeit with some reservations. Public apology and development assistance as compensation, although the agreement was negotiated without the participation of the affected communities, quote unquote. That's the United Nations, which says that. It speaks volumes about the process that was laid out by John as mandated or directed by the resolution of the National Assembly of 2006. I don't want to take much time. Is Esther available? Esther? Is she on? Esther is not there yet. Okay, in that case, I think we can ask Honorable Ita to come and take a podium. She's going. Maybe we can just then, shall we then, if she's just setting up, then maybe because we meant her intervention to follow that of John in trying to dovetail the narratives. Is she there? Oh, okay. Then, Madam, Honorable. Sorry, I'm very sorry for that. Let's just do that.
Good evening, my comrades, brothers and sisters, friends. My name is Ida Hoffman, and I want to make it very clear that you can know if I talk as who I am talking. My name is Ida Hoffman. Some people there behind have not yet. And then I am the founder of the Nama genocide discussion. And I've started the 29 June 1991 at my kindergarten genocide discussion, included with my traditional leaders, the Bondel Swarts and also the Valgras community, and I have it on paper. I'm also the chairperson of the Nama Genocide Technical Committee. Yes. I cannot stand and point out as how my good friend had pointed out with my grade 3, 5, but I have full confidence in me of saying what I'm going to say now. The month of May 2021 goes down in the history of the Herero and Nama genocide movement as a historic month, albeit not progressively and a landmark, but retrogressively as an anti-climax. After 6 years of bilateral negotiation between the governments of the Republic of Namibia and its counterpart of the Federal Republic of Germany shortly after the 9th round of negotiation in Berlin, news started to leak of a deal between the two governments regarding the vexed question of genocide, apology, and reparation. These negotiations were presumably based on the genocide committed against the Ovaherero, based on the extermination order of 2nd of October 1904, issued by General Lothar von Trotha, then the commander, German colonial military forces in then German Southwest Africa as Namibia, was then known, and the extermination order against the Nama issued that the 22nd of April 1905. Genocide is genocide, and it has happened genocide. There's no way that we can change and bring another word in it. Today is the deal has come to be known variously as the Reconciliation and Reconstruction Agreement or Joint Declaration. The foundation of these negotiations, Namibia in particular, the affected communities of the Ovaherero and Nama, and indeed the entire international human rights community, have been made to believe by the Namibian government is that 2006 resolution of the Nation Assembly. I was in the assembly. I was there when late Chief Kaimo Rirako brought the motion in the parliament. I was there. The essence of the motion by the Ovaherero Paramount Chief, Dr. Kaimo Rirako, leading to this resolution was and has been for the various affected communities, including the Ovaherero and Nama on one side, meaning the affected communities speaking directly with the German government, engaging in a triloquy with the German interested third party. Because its citizens were engaged in foreign sovereign, naturally, it did not mean that the Namibian government was neutral observer, but indeed had the responsibility to act in the best interest of its citizens. As a successor government to the colonial occupational authorities of Germany and apartheid South Africa regime, respectively, the Namibian government indeed had some responsibility and still has the responsibility of ensuring an amicable and just resolution of this vexed question. Just from the perspective of the international legal instrument pertaining to genocide, mentioning but one in this regard, the UN Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide of 1948. In terms of 2006, the Namibian National Assembly resolution was adopted unanimously by the August House, a round-table meeting to take place, facilitated by the Namibian government, and bringing together the various stakeholders, notably the affected communities, so that they could, most importantly, formulate a common position and front in their common demand. And that question was asked by late Chief Kaimo Rirako, let his soul rest in peace, directly to Otoni Noyoma. And the answer which was given by Honorable Otoni Noyoma that the Nama and the Herero will have a meeting roundtable together with the German government and the Namibia government will only be the mediator. Yes, this common demand entailing acknowledgement. Acknowledgement. Whatever you have done, you must acknowledge the wrongs and the goods, what you have done. The logic behind the demand of acknowledgement for the wrongs done by the Germans against the Nama is clear. Justice calls for honesty, integrity. It calls for truth, and it insists for the backing with facts. If justice to be done, the wrongs done that led to the genocide, injustice must be acknowledged. By the German, the perpetrator, the Germans are the ones who killed our ancestors. They killed our people. Chief John Abraham Christian, 25th October, was shot in front of his wife. That was 1903. In front of his family. That is what they have done. They took all our resources. We have become the poorest of the poor. They took our land. We don't have lands today. They have taken over. Yes. They took our cattle. They took all the things of us. That is what we want. Then they must acknowledge the wrongs what they have done to us. They are the ones to acknowledge the brutality, inequality, and clear that the wrongs done leading to genocide be acknowledged for what they have are genocide. Genocide is genocide. In the normal course of human events and interactions, where equality for people in the platform we deal on, and mutual respect is applied and honored, people who so regard each other must look at each other and the wrongs committed and say with all honesty, I am sorry. I am sorry. That an honest apology be offered directly to the people who were wronged, meaning the affected communities. Repatriation. There are skulls, remains, artifacts are there. And you know, in our culture is that you talk about reparation. Yes, you talk about reparation. Reparation must be there. You must see the money, whatever is there, you must see it. But those remains must come back so that we can see them. Some who can go in to the museum can go in. Some that we must bury them, so that the day can come where we can say to our ancestors, let your soul rest in peace. Let your soul rest in peace. That means after that, we can divide. That is how we are doing our things. And I believe that our government know the tradition also of their people, because our government is the father and the mother, and we are the children, and we must be treated in the right way. Reparation. The perpetrators of damage and injuries to others in the civilized and just world must repair the damage caused by their wrongful deeds to others. It is only through realizing and undertaking corrective actions with remorse that the perpetrators can be trusted and be regarded as friends with respect by the vanquished, the victims. When you talk about apology, that is something. First thing, you have to be honest with yourself. If you are honest with yourself, then it comes where the people which you are sitting with, those people you have done these things to, it goes over to them. It goes to the broader community. It goes over into the whole world. Honesty of apology. And I'm not talking about things which I have read in books. I know what I'm talking about because I have started a kindergarten, which is now 37 years old. And I have learned there to be honest with myself. To be honest with these children goes over to the parents and the broader community. The world we live in today calls the demands from us peace, justice, safety, and security for all of us. Reconciliation is the best possibility, me assure, available on which to build lasting peace. Namibia and Germany need to reconcile their past and their presence for a better tomorrow for both their respective people. Reconciliation. Reconciliation. It goes with healing the wounds of the past. We are sitting with wounds. We are having pains. We are crying in our beds. Reconciliation. Remember what you have done in the past. And come together with the people. And even we all also have to come together. Talk about the past. Healing. We must heal ourselves. Healing the wounds of the past. Reconciliation. Shake hands and start off fresh. The aforementioned are the salient points for any meaningful negotiation between the equal partners. Indivisibility of the demand for the acknowledgement of the crime of genocide. As far as the affected communities, wherever they find themselves, whether in Namibia, in diaspora, as the been crossly overlooked pertaining to the negotiation that have been ongoing between the Namibia government and the German counterpart, to the extent that the reconciliation and reconstruction agreement or joint declaration makes no mention of the Overherero and the Nama in the diaspora of especially Botswana and South Africa, to mention but two countries and how they are equal victims of this genocide. They are equal. It is their day where they also have to run out for their lives and find them today. There in Togo, Cameroon, Botswana, South Africa. Yes. There is no way that we can talk about joint declaration. There's no way. We have not sat around the table and we have not talked about it. There is no way. Secondly, is that we don't accept it, but we don't want also that just money must just be included for money without a name of reparation. Reparation, not joint declaration. It is the people, the Nama and the Hereros, together with the Germans, have to sit and have to tell the Germans what they also want. Yes, in Parliament, all the different tribes was there. The Bushmans was there. The Damaras was there. All the others was there. I am one of them who was asking, and I called Chief Justice Garweb several times. Because if I go to Germany, the Germans always ask about, what about the Damaras? And then I came back to him and I said to him, what did you say? I spoke to him. I spoke with Transip in my house more than 3 times. Nothing has happened. I spoke with Royal Tui Toto many times. Where are you, son? the Germans are asking about you. You are not there. So, from side, on behalf of the Nama, I wanted to say that we have tried our best. The last time it is where Justus Garweb have asked me to write a letter for him and invite him. Now, I am not a leader, traditional leader. I cannot invite him. So, it is instructive, and the agreement is being referred to as the Reconciliation and Reconstruction Agreement. As they say, a leopard can never change its spots. One can not but be reminded of the idea taught by Namibian churches early in the beginning of the campaign for restorative justice of reconciliation funds, which had the tacit approval of both the Namibia and German government. Not long after then, the German Minister of Economic Development, Cooperative Heider Ziel came up with a special initiative targeted equally like reconstruction and development assistance as part of reconciliation agreement, joint declaration for areas predominantly inhabited by the affected communities. The Czech-word impact and history of the special initiative is well documented. We know money come in the country. We know about the bilateral agreements. We know. But when you look, you see what happens with the Namas and the Hereros. In their region, nothing and nothing and nothing is happening. Therefore, the joint declaration is by we, the Nama Genocide Technical Committee, on behalf of the Namas, unacceptable. Unacceptable. And if it comes where they will decide to put more money in and will not give the name and say that it's for reparation and wanted to bring in for joint declaration, we cannot accept it. No ways. It cannot go on like that. I will be finished just now. Yes. Reconciliation Agreement Declaration has been widely rejected, not only by a section of the affected communities, but international human rights also. We are in communication with these people. A section of affected communities have principally rejected the agreement joint declaration, not because of mere greediness of the development aid it offers, but because the negotiation leading to agreement joint declaration were formed beginning fundamentally. We don't accept it. Yes, I'm coming to my last part. In the sense that the affected communities were not engaged from the beginning as owners of the process, but only given a ride in an already moving bus and on a journey that they did not know how and where it was conceived, let alone thereto it was hidden. The affected communities were thus from the beginning not part of the whole process, hence they declined to be part of the process, the conceptualizations thereof, and its aims and objectives of which they were not party to, let alone not being consulted regarding the various structures on which they were invited to serve. Does anyone really invite someone to his own birthday party? No. Thus, from the beginning, the affected communities were not party to the process. Thus, they could not be expected to be part of its midway, with its aims and objectives and ultimately this destiny as ill-defined. It has been misguided, despite the pretense that its foundation was the 2006 National Assembly resolution. That is why a section of the affected communities all along have declined to be part of the process. Seeing the outcome of this process, which has been flawed from the beginning, more than anything else, a section of the affected communities has been more than vindicated for the principles, positions that they have taken, because reconciliation agreement declaration has been no surprise whatsoever, but a confirmation of the long-held and entrenched position of the government of the Federal Republic of Germany that no genocide was committed against Nama and Ovaherero, and thus no reparation. And that is the play that I'm afraid that our government will be convinced by these people and play the same play too, and on their own children. The Namibia government is our father and mother, and they must take responsibility of their children and try to do the best for their children. In summary, initially there was fear, especially amongst the affected communities, that the Namibia government, by allowing the reconciliation joint declaration to be debated in the National Assembly, was another of its Machiavellian tactic to legitimize by bulldozing it through the National Assembly, and eventually singing, sealing, and delivering. Indeed, this remains a strong possibility. But if there is one thing that the debate in the National Assembly on reconciliation agreement joint declaration has revealed, is that it is no more than an instrument for the enhancements of the bilateral relations between the Namibian state and the German counterpart. Secondly, that Germany has not recognized the genocide committed against the Nama and the Ovaherero. That has got nothing to do with Germany's genocide against the Nama and Ovaherero. And thus that Germany is not paying reparation to the Nama and the Ovaherero. That's what Germany offers to do in terms of reconciliation agreement joint declaration is not based on the admission of guilt for the crime of genocide in terms of the UN Convention on the punishment and prevention of the crime of genocide, that the Germany's commitment is out of moral and political responsibility, that Germany is and has never been prepared to negotiation with tribes, and what Germany is offering is mere development assistance in the context of her established cordially bilateral relation with the Namibia, as much as the real context of such a relation is Germany colonized past in Namibia, leading to genocide of the Nama of the Herero, and last but not least, it is a holy case. It is a sacred case. This case, genocide, is a noble case, and we must handle it with dignity and respect. We can talk about bones and say they are there. We can talk, but they hear and they see, because they are still waiting for the day where we can say, let your soul rest in peace. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable. Thank you, the mother of the reparations movement. Thank you very much. Let me just give you one little quote from Fabian Salvioli, the Special Rapporteur on the promotion of truth, justice, and guarantees of non-repetition, in his report that I cited earlier. He says, as a new state-level manager, the state that has gained independence must also assume obligations. Although these obligations do not cover responsibility for the acts committed by the colonizing power, they do relate to rehabilitation, socio-economic integration, and guaranteed access to justice. Justice. This is a transitional justice issue. This is a restorative justice issue that we are dealing with. Alongside that, other essential services to victims, and also the quest for truth and memorialization. It is very important that our government is reminded that what they are doing is not a simple bilateral issue that requires a sovereign to a sovereign. There are obligations of critical importance anchored in international human rights and humanitarian laws. Let me now turn to the next presenter and call our sister, Esther. Esther, the floor is yours.
And in that regard, I'd like to share my screen at this stage, okay? Screen sharing has been disabled, so I'll just speak.
Sorry, sis. I'm just gonna go with the moderator now. They cannot hear you.
They can't hear me?
No, on your end. No, on your end.
Oh, okay.
Because I think they try to reconnect it through so that it can echo through the other room.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah. So they want me to hold on?
Please.
Endorsing everything that's already been said. So I just note there's a paragraph in the declaration, and this is from chapter 4, paragraph 14, which says the Namibian government and people accept Germany's apology and believe that it paves the way to a lasting mutual understanding and the consolidation of a special relationship between the two nations, as affirmed by the two Bundestag resolutions of 1989 and 2004 respectively. This shall close the painful chapter of the past and mark a new dawn in the relationship between our two countries and peoples. I begin there not because I think this is anything to be commended, it's not, but I think this paragraph in particular is very indicative of the problematic nature of this joint declaration and the fact that the Namibian government has arrogated to itself this right to represent all of the peoples of Namibia even though they have not been consulted, and especially the affected communities, the Ovaherero, the Nama, and we've also heard about the San and the Damara peoples, okay? And this really speaks to a big part of the problem, because Germany is using the fact of what Namibia is doing to also endorse this very colonial attitude of not recognizing your own rights to reparations. But to challenge that, it's not necessarily challenging Germany. In my view, this is where that notion of reparation that we don't emphasize enough, which is our own self-repair, comes in. Because there are two dimensions to reparations. There is the external, which is what everyone else owes us, in particular the government of Germany, in your case. But then there is the internal, which is what we owe each other. And that debt that we owe to each other and what we owe to our ancestors, what you owe to your ancestors, whose claim this is being, in their names, this claim for genocide redress is being made. So it means that we have to ensure that whatever we do, and I speak in the collective we because I'm an African and I'm a Pan-Africanist, so I see this struggle as my struggle as well, okay? And Professor Chimwezu advocates this notion of holistic reparations, which we use in the International Social Movement for African Reparations. And he talks about self-made repairs. Now, he's not discounting any compensatory agreements or land to be recovered, but he points out that what will make that more possible is when we can engage in that self-repair amongst ourselves and not actually carry on that colonial mentality just because there was some declaration by the United Nations, that somehow gave the ruling party at the time responsibility, or only accepted or recognized the ruling party of SWAPO in terms of being the legitimate and authoritative representative of all the peoples in Namibia. And that is the problem of the neo-colonial nation states. And so when we wage these struggles, which they are not just legal struggles, they are political struggles and battles. But when we wage them, actually using the very mindset and actually system that our oppressors have created, we can never win. We can never win. So we have a responsibility to actually go back to our own sense of law, our own sense of what it means to be human, our own sense of there's a study I discovered, which is specifically on the African philosophy and the case of Ubuntu, but specifically looking at Ubuntu in relation to the Ovaherero people. Because when we lose our own cultural, historical center, then we lose the whole basis from which we are standing. Because otherwise, what we end up doing is reinforcing colonial institutions and processes. Even the United Nations, which has come up with some good initiatives around reparations through struggle. But that cannot be the end of where we see resolution of this issue. Reparations, rightly defined, also entails restoring our indigenous African knowledge systems of art and symbolism, language, music, philosophy, science and technology, spirituality. All of this is what gives us the power and the strength and the legitimacy in terms of making claims on behalf of our ancestors, and also ensuring that we can have the guarantees of non-repetition in terms of our progeny. Dr. Nakuta has already mentioned the basic principles and guidelines on a right to a remedy and reparation for victims of gross violations of international human rights law and serious violations of international humanitarian law. And under this, there's a lot of focus in this joint declaration about this abysmal sum of 1.05 billion euros. It's such an insult. But even so, that whether it's seen as compensation or not, which in my view it's not, okay, And I don't think we should be arguing that it is compensation and Germany should recognize its compensation. It is not. It is actually being framed within the discourse of development assistance. You don't have a reparations agreement with this joint declaration. And if we make the mistake of making it about whether they could use certain words or not, we miss the point, okay? But even under this UN framework, which was really formalized in 2005, but represents, customary international law and other types of law over centuries that have been formed around reparations, we always seem to, as African people in particular, go after the compensation. But when you haven't had effective restitution, which is actually one of the first principles of that UN framework, then you are in a weak position to even negotiate compensation. So it's about, where do we put our priorities? Do we put them around European currencies that can be devalued at any time? And look at the case of Zimbabwe, when it wanted to go down the route of exercising land reform in the interest of the people. What did they do? They devalued the currency internationally. So even whatever monies were put into land reform meant nothing. And we're seeing the same dangers in this joint declaration. And I'm saying to you, my brothers and sisters, across Namibia, but in particular over Herero, Nama, San, Damara, and other affected communities, we can no longer afford to think this is just your own unique struggle. We have to Pan-Africanize and internationalize. If not, you will lack the power, because it's not just about the do-gooder Europeans in Europe, in Germany and other places that are going to fight your corner for you. It has to be defended by our international community of African peoples, first and foremost. But when we do so, we have to assert our rights to repair, full repair. Don't just single out compensation, because especially when you are negotiating from a position of weakness. Restitution, what was taken, and Honorable Ida Hoffman spoke very, very passionately about the dispossession and the continuing oppression, the transgenerational transmission of oppression and dispossession, which cannot be reduced to money. That what you've lost, what you have lost, are not just there in the country, those who were forced into exile, who have not been included, your communities in Botswana, in South Africa, in other parts of Africa, who also have been neglected in these negotiations. So let us, you've been waiting a long time from when the genocide happened at the beginning of the so-called 20th century. Let us make sure we join the dots, build the strength, build the capacity, build the infrastructure amongst yourselves so that you can no longer be divided and ruled. Because unless we correct these weaknesses amongst us, then we will never actually be victorious. So under the UN framework from 2005, why is it we're not emphasizing what Jewish people did, which was the seminal case that often gets referred to? And remember, for Jewish people, all that compensation money, which still continues today and was negotiated by the Jewish Claims Conference and then the emerging state of Israel, the first act of repair was establishing a powerful super state, military super powerful state, to defend its interests and defend its gains. Now, I'm not going to go into the politics of that agreement, but let us look at a European example if we're going to follow Europe. Let us look at the examples that Europe has set for us and for the world. So the guarantees of non-repetition is what we're not looking at. How do we ensure that any gains that are made now are going to benefit generations to come, especially when you have language that speaks to this closing a painful chapter? The chapter cannot be closed. We're just scratching the surface. The other aspects of reparation, the rehabilitation, clearly we have to rehabilitate our African minds, because those who've been involved in the negotiations are not negotiating with an African mind, with an Over-Herero mind, with a Nama mind. That's what we have to reclaim before we can be going before Europeans and making deals that are actually spitting on the graves and the spirits of our ancestors. The measures of satisfaction, the symbolic reparations, that's all. Even if it were to be considered anything reparatory, a joint declaration could only fit under the realm of symbolic. That is just surface level. It's the symbolism, it's not the materiality and the actuality of what reparations should be, okay? The question of the right to represent, who represents you, is one of the unfinished business of colonialism. And the fact that there isn't recognition of your own traditional leadership and governance structures, that it's all coming under this state of Namibia. So that is the internal struggle, the national struggles and the class struggles that we have to wage and win within that nation state. But you can only do that when you Pan-Africanize. And we have to expose the government of Namibia internationally, okay? Just as we are also exposing the government of Germany. This is what we must do, because what you lack is the power. It's not about the morality, it's not about the justice, it's about the power to be able to enforce your will, your people's will, and that of your ancestors, and that of our generations yet to be born. And we know that there is collective victimization. And that point that Dr. Nakuta made about ensuring that we don't limit the reparations case to just the genocide, because it's the genocide and a lot more. So these are some of the issues that I think that you need to pay great attention to. And I commend you. I totally support you. I've been there. I am so enamored with this struggle and all that you have done to keep the memory and the dignity of your ancestors alive. But there are other aspects that we need to strengthen in order that you can be more victorious, okay? And it's already been mentioned, Fabian Salvioli, the Special Rapporteur of the UN on the promotion of truth, justice, reparation and guarantees of non-recurrence. And he says, instead of reparations for past violations, aid is provided through development cooperation or other means that do not implicitly entail accountability. This was a recent report in July 2021. Development aid is not genuine reparation, which is what is in this dastardly joint declaration by the Federal Republic of Germany and the Republic of Namibia. Development aid is not genuine reparation. However, because it perpetuates and reinforces an economic and political system, which is what we need to pay attention to, that is based on colonial hierarchies of submission. As Over-Herero, as Nama, as San, as Damara, and other affected communities, you have been forced into a position of submission. Who can be victorious from a position of submission, no matter how righteous and sacred our cause? Reparations, by contrast, imply that the former colonizing power has a debt to the former colony. On the other hand, as has been made clear by the previous holder of this mandate, development programs are not, strictly speaking, reparations programs, for they do not target victims specifically, and their aim is to satisfy basic and urgent needs to which beneficiaries have a right as citizens, not necessarily as victims. We have Ruben Carenza from the International Center from Transitional Justice, who says again, development is not a substitute for reparation. Whilst development is a right for all, Reparation is a right for a specific subset of people, those who have been victims of their human rights violations. And in the context of Africa, we also recognize the African human and people's rights, your group rights, your collective rights as indigenous peoples as well. Reparation has intrinsic value in that it restores victims. So what is important is that you focus on what will bring about the restoration. And this is what we must do for ourselves. Put your plans together, because the government has come up with its own agenda and its own plan. But what is your counter plan? So it's not just to resist and to critique what they have done. What is your alternative vision for Namibia, for Africa, for the world? That is how we have to be thinking as African people. Remember, it began with us. We are the mothers and fathers of civilization, and where we go, the whole world follows in our path. Because we have an opportunity to actually set a pace, a new civilization around reparations, and bring about a post-African reparations world order. And then see the strength and the power when you pan-Africanize, because not all of our people experience genocide, but it depends on how we're defining it. If we're just looking at the 1948 Genocide Convention, then we will have a limited view of what genocide is. But one of the things that Dr. Raphael Lemkin, who was the coiner of the term genocide and helped to develop that 1948 convention, in his Axis of Occupied Rule in Europe book that he wrote, he pointed out that genocide has two dimensions. One, the destruction of the national pattern of the oppressed group, okay? And then the other is the imposition of the national pattern of the oppressor group. We miss that out when we talk about genocide, okay? And by this, he's referring to those institutions of culture, of healthcare, of education, economics, everything that a people need to develop to be whole and to ensure their continuity beyond the physical lives of direct individuals and humans, but into the ancestral realm, okay? That is what we need to think about. How do we return to ourselves as African people? That which was demonized, which was called devilish, fetish, that we have abandoned because a lot of us have become Europeanized and we haven't decolonized that. That's why how you can have Namibians, so-called, of whichever extraction, because I know that there have been some over Herero who have been in collusion with this state initiative. There have been at times. But that is how you can have some of our own people actually make these deals, not knowing the implications this is going to have, not only for yourselves now, but for future generations. And you don't have to just look to your own example. Be aware of what happened in the case of the Matua and others, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, which was those three elderly so-called Mau Mau veterans from the Kenyan Land and Freedom Army, where they forced a negotiated settlement in the British Houses of Parliament, and they got £19.9 million in compensation. A ridiculous sum, because that was to be spread amongst a category of 5,226 or 8 claimants, meaning £2,600 each or something like that. When you had individuals who had survived torture, women who had vermin stuck up them, bottles stuck up themselves, men castrated, and that is what we think is repair. To have a settlement, that the compensation is so small that in England, if you have a whiplash injury in a car, you get more than that. So we cannot use European currency to actually determine the value of what was lost. the value of our African lives, our African ancestors, the value of our lands. This is where we're going wrong. We have to develop another rubric of value. And yes, there is economic arguments to be made, but economics is about money. Economics in its true meaning means how do we manage the resources of our home? And our home is earth home. That's what it means. Again, the colonial mindset, where we've been taught in a particular way, but the way is the ways of Europe. And Frantz Fanon told us decades ago, our job is not to model Europeans. We have to set a pace, a new humanity, a new man, a new woman. That is our historic mission and duty. And we must not betray it. We must not be the ones who betray it. Now, this compensation deal that the Mau Mau veterans accepted meant that when there was a subsequent group of claimants, including the wife of Field Marshal Dedan Kamati and 5,000 others, their claim was debarred. Why? Because the British courts would no longer accept any further claims. And this is part of the danger, how dangerous this joint declaration is. Because even though it's not being framed in reparatory terms, this is part of Germany saying that is it. We are washing our hands of this. And you cannot allow this agreement to hold, to stand. It has to be resisted by any and all means necessary. And you need to call on and draw support from your African family and allies around the world, not just in Germany. This is not just about Germany, because what Germany is trying to do to you, it's going to want to do to all other African people, and other European countries will do the same. That is why we're taking a very strong interest in this case and this situation. So we don't yet have the uhuru and the freedom. And of course, it is up to you to be in the vanguard of leading us all into a future. But it has to be based on the kind of world that we want to create, your alternative plans for alternative progression, because a lot of what is been touted as development is maldevelopment. And you can't see this outside of the worldwide context of a climate and ecological crisis, which has come about because of maldevelopment and the beginnings of chattel enslavement followed by colonization and this extractivist model of economic progress. We cannot continue that. And just like in Europe, look at what the European civil societies are doing, the white people are doing. They're changing their governments, they're resisting extractivism. And many of them are standing up to resist extractivism in Africa. But we need you to also do your part. So my brothers, my sisters, I think I've probably said enough. The key thing, I think my final point to say is that reparations are a right of you, for you, the affected communities. The state cannot take away your rights. These are human rights. They are innate. They are indivisible. Nobody can take your rights away from you. But rights are not something that are just handed to you on a plate. Rights are something that we have to fight for and we have to defend in each generation, lest the gains of our ancestors and their freedom fighters will go in vain. So that is what I would say to you. This joint declaration is based on an antiquated model of international law, which privileges negotiations between states. The UN guidelines on a right to a remedy and reparation emphasize victims, not states. It is not the nation state that has been the primary victim. It is you, the affected communities, and you have those rights in international law. Use all the rights that you have, and you have to defend them. And again, it is also about recognizing that we're using a modality and legal framings that have come about through imperialism. So we have to also be prepared to create new law and develop new legal institutions, just like Jewish people didn't allow their case to be determined by Nazi courts. They had to develop a special tribunal. And what I would say is there is a case, just as like the government of Namibia cannot be a lawbreaker, although it is. You have to also agitate for those internal changes and transformations within the country. And truth and justice is essential to repair, so that you can have your own transitional justice mechanisms, as other countries in Africa have been doing. Ghana, Kenya, I'm not saying they're perfect, but where has been that Truth and Reconciliation Commission within Namibia? How can you be reconciling with people that tried to exterminate you when you haven't had a process like that in Namibia amongst Africans? It won't work. So I speak with passion because I speak with the ancestors, and the ancestors are angry. They are angry for what we are allowing to happen on our watch because of the tyranny of gradualism. And the tyranny of gradualism says, let's just do this. If we just frame it this way, we're going to win some gains. Let's not fight our whole case because, that we're not going to win it that way. That is a tyranny, because what it means is that we are collaborating in our own auto-genocide. So my brothers and my sisters, I really urge you, intensify that liberation struggle, which is the real liberation struggle for the kind of Namibia that you want to see, the kind of Africa that we need to forge ahead. That has only just begun. And you know that African proverb that says, if you want to go far, you have to go together. If you want to go fast, you go alone. But going fast has brought about this deception of a reconciliation and whatever agreement they're calling it. It's a deception. It is a fraud. And we must not allow this fraud to be perpetrated on our watch. Because God forgive us, and may our ancestors forgive us if we allow this to continue. I give thanks, and I really want to encourage you to keep up this struggle. We are here, call on us, also challenge other sections of the diaspora to come to your assistance, because we have to do something about these neo-colonial nation states that are actually basking and holding on to coloniality, but using it to further downpress our people. This is not repair. This is not the restitution. This is not the rehabilitation. And we have to pay equal attention. And the most important aspect of reparations that we should be identifying, apart from restitution, is the guarantees of non-repetition, because the level of technology that our oppressors, internal and external, have, genocide will just turn into omnicide. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Recording stopped.
Maybe better one pizza. Thank you. Konje mkonde kuipothe.
Osista ya wale wanangoli hapo yo.
Ene video mundu atete omunya ko uruo katina kuyaruka kuluka mundu atete.
Good evening.
Hello.
Yeah, go for it. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and good evening, champions of the struggle. My name is Stephen Kadeire Raurau Hangara, a panelist today and speaking from the perspective of the diasporans, most notably from Botswana. I am a cultural activist as well as a human rights lawyer, and foremostly, am I clear?
Yes.
Penny, am I fine? Are you hearing me?
You're fine. I think somebody has unmuted themselves. So please, guys, just
please,
respect
let them
whoever
do
is
so that I
speaking.
finish.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
yes, like I've said, I, as well as a champion of the genocide and reparations course in Botswana. Now, let me start from the outset by acknowledging the pieces and sharings that have been made by my sister Esther, brother Mbakuma, my brother Nakuta, as well as sister Ida Hoffman. Thank you so very much for that enlightening, pieces and sharings. Now, from the outset, I would like to say this, that from the perspective of the diasporans, especially in Botswana, I want to put two salient points that whenever we talk of the genocide, the German genocide on us, we emphasize the three affected communities being the Nama, the Ovaherero, and the Ovambanderu. These are the people that we currently find in Botswana as having fled and been exiled by the Germans as a result of the atrocious acts that were perpetrated against them in Namibia. One of the things that I think I should take as a challenge to whoever has been a champion also and also a participant in this is, why have we limited our narrative to the narrative that has long been dictated to us by the Germans? And that is of just limiting the genocide to only the Ovaherero and the Nama instead of the Obambanderu as an addition. Because one of the things that we must remember is this, that when the Germans came onto our land in present-day Namibia, one of the tactics they devised was the divide and rule tactics. And the fact that today we don't find the Ovambanderu not being mentioned anywhere is because of those kind of devices that they put in place in order to pit ourselves against one another. So I want us to challenge ourselves on that narrative and try to see as to whether it can be corrected in accordance with how it ought to be. Because I don't think we must allow colonialists to come here and dictate to us as to what the narrative with regard to us should be. That is the first point. The second point is this, that I don't know where it came from and why we continue to limit the genocide period from 1904 to 1908. This is the narrative that I think we've adopted globally, if not universally. We have continued to say that. But if I may go back to history, which we all know very much about, the likes of our paramount chief, Kahimemwa, was assassinated in 1896, not by his own brothers, not by anybody else from his African friends or anybody else, but by the Germans. And the Germans were doing this in furtherance of the decree or the order that was given by their country to come and kill whoever they can find in Namibia in order to pave way for their settlement. These are the two important points that I would like us to go back and look at. One, why have we limited the narrative to only Nama and Herero? Why have we allowed the Ovambanderu to be subsumed under the Overherero? Secondly, why have we limited the period to only between 1904 to 1908, as if nothing ever happened prior to that, and nothing ever happened in furtherance of the orders that were given by the delegates of the Germans when they came into Namibia? Those are the very, very important points that I think we must go back home and interrogate. Now, to go on, I very much appreciate what has been discussed by my sisters and as well as my brothers. And one of the things that I think I should start on with is this: that whenever you find the Nama, the Overherero and Ovambanderu in present-day Botswana, you are talking about people who never came here on holiday. You are talking about people who never came here voluntarily. You are talking about people who came here as a result of the genocidal atrocities that were perpetrated against them by the German government. So that there was never a people called the Nama, the Overherero, and the Ovambanderu prior to the German occupation of present-day Namibia. But that's one of the things that we must go back home knowing. So that whenever you see these people, you must know materially that these are people who are a result of what the Germans did in Namibia. That is very, very clear, and it must be very, very clear in that fashion. Now, I don't have to go and explore any legal exigencies with regard to this matter. I think my sister has said it, Brother Nakuta has said it, but one of the things that I think I should come in now is to discuss the JD, or the joint declaration between the German government and the Namibian government, insofar as it is purported to extend to us in the diaspora. I would say us in the diaspora, including South Africa and Namibia. South Africa in Botswana. South Africa in the sense that my brother Thabo is not here, but I would take it that the circumstances in which he finds himself and that we find ourselves here as diasporans and as people who are exiles from Namibia have or find themselves in. Now, in so far as the JD is concerned, the joint declaration is concerned, I think this is just a piecemeal document crafted and initiated only between two governments. That is the government of Germany and the government of Namibia. The document itself is not so microscopic. All of us, I think, who are here have read it, have gone through it, and I don't think it requires any Solomonic wisdom for someone to know that this is just an agreement between two governments, the government of the Republic of Germany as well as the government of the Republic of Namibia. Something that is with disdain, and I repeat, with disdain, reduced to a bilateral issue as opposed to being a multilateral issue. Now, when you talk about genocide, you are talking about people who were killed by Germany. In fact, killing is even a lighter word. I think I should just go on to the real word, genocide. Now, as a result of that, you find these people not only in Namibia, you find them in South Africa, you find them in Botswana, where they've assumed different citizenships. They are not citizens of the Republic of Namibia. They belong to sovereign states, South Africa and Botswana. These are people who came, like I've said, as a result of the genocide by the Germans. People who have lost their land as a result of that. The land which currently is in the hands of the perpetrators of the genocide. People who have lost their language. Just a few hours ago, I got a call from my brother, just within Botswana, who is in Sabong. He was trying to talk to me. I pretended as if I'm not hearing what he was saying. And I requested for him to speak in Oshirero. He could not speak the language. And he came and laughed at me and he said, Stephen Rao, you are one of the people that has always been a champion in this regard. Why then today you are laughing at me? I said, no, I'm not laughing at you. I'm trying to buttress the evidence that you are unable to speak the language that you ought to be speaking as a result of the Germans. And we now have a country called Namibia who know very consciously and very well that we are here and we find ourselves in the circumstances in which we find ourselves as a result of the German genocidal acts. And we have a country very much aware of our history, which is downplaying what we went through. And now they are reducing something that we should be part of and reducing it to something bilateral only between themselves. Now, insofar as we are concerned in the diaspora, we are not hearing about the JD in isolation. And it is not that we have not done anything about it. We have always, out of our own civilization, we have always implored anybody else who might be privy to this to also be conscious of the fact that there are people elsewhere who are supposed to be part of this, who are not part of this currently. In 2017, a delegation came from Botswana, my country, here where I'm speaking from. They sought a meeting with the Namibian government. Upon realizing that the Namibian government has expressed interest in this matter, they said, we want to have a meeting with you because there are certain things that we want to discuss with you. We feel we cannot tackle and interrogate this matter indivisively because it's a matter that has to be interrogated compositely, in that it involves citizens, rather it involves people in different countries who belong to different citizenships. Fortunately, that meeting was held in Windhoek, and the chair of that meeting was the current Vice President of Namibia, Honorable Nangolo Mbumba. That was in 2018. And in that meeting, it came very, very clear, where the Vice President affirmed very, very clearly that he thought and he saw and he was convicted that the people in the diaspora must be part of the negotiating table, or rather they should be around the negotiating table with other affected communities. Whatever came out of that, we don't know. The next day we heard there was a JD or joint declaration that was hedged between the government of Namibia and the government of Germany, stealthily. And I should just stress that word, stealthily. On the other hand, the same year, 2017, we wrote a letter to the German government around the same issue, advising them that, look, we are in the diaspora as a result of what you did to us several years, rather, over a century ago. And we have heard that there are this kind of negotiations. In fact, we had even long expressed that before that particular letter I'm talking about. But the German government responded and they said, look, we have opened only one window of discussion and negotiation, and that is with the government of Namibia. So we are not prepared to open any other window for negotiation. Unless you people club yourselves together, what an insult is that? Unless you people group yourselves together with the government of Namibia, that's when we can be able to do that. They are talking about me. They are talking about somebody they expelled from my own land. They are talking about somebody who has forgotten who does not speak his own language. They are talking about somebody who has lost his land. And I found myself here ostracized, with people always calling me names as to where I come from and as to what my nature and background is. And they are saying to me, they're dictating to me that I should rather club myself with the Namibian government. And this is the Namibian government that we know very well is very conscious of our history. In 1960, we saw a good number of people going into exile. Why? To try to regain their land that was in the hands of Boers, regain their land that was hitherto in the land of Germans. These are the people who gained independence in 1990, and they are telling us that they are oblivious of our colonial past, the Namibian government. What is that? And where do we stand? The JD itself, like I've said, is not so microscopic. There is not even a single paragraph, or even less, a single sentence that makes allusion or reference to the people in their diaspora, either Botswana or South Africa. They are talking about development in Namibia alone. And sometimes I wonder, when did the Namibian government forget the words of Kwame Nkrumah in 1957 when he said the independence of Ghana cannot be meaningful unless it is tied to the independence of the entire Africa. When did Namibia forget? When did the government of Namibia forget how they came through our border here to seek collaboration with us in Botswana, in South Africa, Tanzania, to fight colonial forces? When did they forget? Why now are they being taken into the closet and negotiating something that they know very consciously and very well that affects anybody else who is not included there, and doing it as if they don't know? That's where we are. We are not part of the joint declaration, and we are not even covered by the extension of the joint declaration. It's a sham. It's a disdained document. It's a document that I think was crafted stealthily. It's a document that I think was crafted in total disregard of the dignity and the rights of the people. And I can say today that it is not too late for the Namibian government to civilize itself to the consciousness and the reality that the people who are supposed to be part of this have been left out. It is not too late. If they continue to go on, we will continue to fight on. If they continue to disregard us, we'll continue to regard our cause. Thank you so very much, moderator. And that's all I had to do. We are not privy to the joint declaration. We are not covered by the extension. Our plea is that the Namibian government goes back to the drawing board. They tell the German government that, look, we usurped something that we thought was our own, that this thing is not only something that should be limited to a bilateral issue, it's a multilateral issue that involves our people here and our people elsewhere. Namibia must act holistically. They must act African. They must not be selfish. That's my point. Thank you so very much. Oh, you want me to still go on? Yes, I can see you smiling. Eh?
I believe you.
Okay, Rao. Thank you, Rao, Stephen. Thank you very much. You can now just go on mute so that we can allow. I have to put in a word of apology on behalf of our brother from South Africa, Thabo. He is not feeling well today, so he can't join us. So I think with that, since we have been here for close to 2 hours now, let me move and call upon our brother from the UK, Komo Mushiwa, who will be the last presenter, and then we would summarize and call it a night. Komo, floor is yours.
Now, because the context between TJ, transitional justice, and reparative justice with the current agreement is nowhere to be found. It doesn't speak to each other. So we have probably just gathered that much. Because everything has been said now. I don't really know what to say, but I'm probably just going to ask a few questions. For example, who are you when you look into the mirror? Who are you satisfied with who you are as a person, and when you look around as a community or as a collective, are you actually happy? Are you satisfied? Do you think you've been repaired yourself? On top of that, when you say your name, I mean, who gave your name? Are you proud, or do you vibrate with your ancestors when you actually mention your name? What kind of pride goes through your veins? And post spirituality, do you actually hold dear, or is it religion? Because I don't believe in Africa we have indigenous religions. I think we have got indigenous spiritualities. And probably more questions like, what informs your education? Is it programs designed by your own cultural norms, or has been designed by others? And whose economy are you actually enriching? And if you consider now, my brother Stephen, just in Botswana, when you look around where you live right now, is it where your ancestors lived? I don't think so. Just ask yourself why. Because I go around here, I've been in Britain for like 20 years, and when you go around and see other people, they can visit their ancestors, 3, 4, 6 generations, and I can't even, if you go back home, you can't really see 3, 4, 500 people, 500 generations of people, of your own ancestors from where you are, because obviously you've been pushed out. And if the government is talking about redress and restitution and all that, they've been buying farms. They do not even resettle people at all. So I don't know what is in the agreement that can actually be helpful, or can actually be considered as this is some kind of redress, restitution, compensation, or any satisfaction at all. So I just have got all these questions, and if you guys could help answer them, it will be great. And I think Mr. W.H. has had he did hold your hand up for quite a while.
Come on, before he comes in, would I not say something very, 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 very briefly?
Please do.
If you can allow me. Now, you see, there is something that Esther touched on, and it's something that I think she did mention in our previous engagements, especially in 2017. That is touching on reparations. That one of the things that I think we also have, and which I've also been conscious of, is the issue of reparations. And from what I've gathered from her is that there is this kind of reparations that we are currently demanding from Germany. And after we have closed the chapter of reparations with Germany, are we going to lay back and allow our history and our culture to dissipate? And this is where I came up with the word repository reparations. That even after we have closed our chapter with the Germans, we still have challenges of the extinction of our culture, which, according to me, I believe is a natural resource. We still have the obligation to get in place other things that we have lost as a result of colonialism. And these are some of the things that we cannot even leave to Germany. We cannot leave to any colonial government that oppressed us. It inheres in us. Like, for instance, today, if you speak, for instance, in Botswana, if you speak English in your homestead, it's an indication or some indication of civilization. Whenever I come into your home, Komo, and then your kids rush to me to greet me, uncle, uncle, I respond, no, come uncle, I'm on good. So when are we going to, even after our chapter with the Germans is closed, when are we going to clothe ourselves with the responsibility that we are the repository of the propagation and preservation of our culture? This is one thing that I think must just get deeper into our conscience, that we don't only have a war against Germany, we have a war against fate. And having a war against fate, we have a war where our things are dissipating, and where are we to try to propagate this and make them stand? Thank you so much.
Yes, where are we? How do we actually, Sister Esther also mentioned something about internal repair, internal reparation. When you mention, even over Bandero, for example, there's always some kind of rejection, even from our own cousins, from our own brothers, from our own sisters. Just a rejection, just because you mentioned that name there. You see, this is where we need to, sort of just heal ourselves, come to terms with who we are, and then just how do we actually go ahead together Just like sister said, when you want to go far, you got to go together. You want to go fast, you got to go alone. So when we know that we actually do need each other, so when do we actually just accept that we need each other, we want each other, we love each other, we are brothers, we are sisters, and we're going to take each other and take care of each other. Mr. What is his name now? Mr. Kabadonge, please. You've had a raised hand for all the while. Please come in. Please come in. Please unmute.
Yes, thank you so much. First, I was exploring. That's why I have raised my hand at first, but then I realized maybe I can make a comment. And Chief, say welcome, Kalondunge. Is my name from Chipumbu Traditional Authority. I'm a traditional leader. My question is to my learned friends, Esther and Stephen. Do you know of any subsequent order that has nullified, or for a lack of a better word, rescinded the orders of Ontroda, the extermination orders? Or is this genocide perpetual until today? And to my learned friend Stephen again, Esther said that we should have a plan always in place whenever we want to address these type of issues. Yourself as a diasporian and all other diasporians, do we at present have a plan as to how we should come around the negotiating table? If those two questioning comments are clear, that would all be my contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, dear sir.
Can I comment more or ask more questions?
We might pass it on to Mr. Sandy Sharonda as well, please, just to take up another question.
Well, thank you. Good evening. I truly appreciate the organizers, the OGF, for organizing this very important platform for us. Let me first share my pedigree. My name is Sandy Sharonda. I don't happen to, unlike maybe Stephen, I don't happen to be fortunate to have a citizenship up to today. I was born in Botswana. I migrated to after independence. When I came into Namibia, I was naturalized. That means I am not a citizen. I was not granted the citizenship. And that goes obviously with what I can, the kind of benefit I can receive as not being a citizen. I'm just a naturalized citizen. Unlike those that were in exile who came back, or although they were born outside the country, but they were treated differently. So this makes a case for us that you have someone who is a former diasporian who comes back, and I'm speaking on behalf of so many of us that are here in Namibia today, who don't have and who don't find the benefit of actually coming back to what they call their motherland. Now, we have talked about very broadly, and I want to forgive my mother, Ida Hoffman, for I get so upset because I'm following what is happening in our legislative assembly. I'm following the discussions ever since they started, and I have been all at their grounds, playing games, political games with this issue. And I want to say here, straightforward, this is not an issue that we need to make a joke with. It's about the lives of people. As Stephen had talked, when we found ourselves in Botswana, we were not there on holiday. We were not there, taken there to go and explore what is happening in Botswana. We found ourselves born in a country that is not ours. We can today not even pride ourselves, even when we were in Botswana, we were called Batama, which is a very derogatory term that meant that we literally, they didn't need us in that area and in that space. It affected our ability to get employment, to get access to education, and so forth. So, and it continues up to date that the Bahereros that are living in Botswana are affected. Their women are still are finding themselves being violated every day. Sometimes they are told to remove their headgear to be taken a picture at a government office. And that's dehumanizing. You can imagine how that is. So I want to say, and I want to forgive my mother for maybe out of not understanding, talking about this issue and creating this impression that there is a father and a mother who is government and we are children. I think that is the very dangerous departure and dispossession, because I think that's why the government today behaves the way they are behaving, because they think that we are juveniles and we need to be guided and be told what needs to happen. And if we adopt that approach, unfortunately, we need to correct the foundations where we are. So the same language in a father and a child. I'm not a
Oh dear, we're losing you, brother. We're losing you. Oh.
Sorry, there was what we have right now is obviously the neo-colonial states that have assumed that right to think that they can speak on behalf of us, and they have the sole mandate to speak on behalf of everybody, not with genocide. Maybe they could have played with that when they were talking about decolonizing the country. But when you talk about the genocide, which affects individuals that are affected, the victims, that cannot be the case. So I want to say, when we talked about, and I think this was what was said by, and we must agree, we don't have a compensation pack. We don't have a reparation currently on the table. We're talking about joint declaration. That is a shame, that is devoid of anything. We have deduced, and this is very painful. What I have been watching is that we have deduced a whole legislative assembly, which is parliament, into a mere consultative body. And that is what we are hearing today, that what was happening in terms of the submission that was made, it was just a consultation. That's what government is saying. That's the danger of it when you're trying to undermine an issue like this. So I want to say that I wanted to just bring that picture, that we have people that like me, who are sitting and don't know where they belong, because they cannot even go back to Botswana. I can't go back to Botswana right now where I am. And I cannot also advance in terms of moving, in terms of rights in this country where I am. So that is what I wanted to just put across, that how dangerous and how damaging this whole process has been to us as individuals, but also as a collective. I thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. Oh dear. Oh dear.
Hello? Thanks. Shall I take it that ¿Cómo? Hello? They can't hear us, huh? Can you hear us? I think the last few minutes, since Como was able to facilitate that viewers' intervention or participation, maybe we can do that for the next 10 minutes up to 9:30, and then we can Como, you can wrap up, and we close the proceedings.
the effects of the orders. Now, the first order was in 1904 against the Ovaherero, and I should mention here that when the von Trotter referred, or rather Germany, because that was the principal, when Germany referred to the Hereros, she was referring to the Ovaherero and Ovambandero as a collective, not singularly. And I would say, in response to that question, that order was not rescinded, because this is the order that we saw executed in us being annihilated in the way that we were. This is the order that we saw, I mean, in seeing us fleeing to present-day Botswana, with a lot of my grandmothers and my aunts and my everything dying during delivery, and with their babies being scrambled for by hyenas and jackals and lions. This is the order whose execution saw us landing in South Africa to be peasant workers in the mines there. This is the order whose execution saw us currently being referred to with derogatory names. This is the order whose execution saw us being classified as minorities insofar as our constitution in Botswana is concerned. So it was never rescinded. We continue to see the effects and the result of those orders continuing and continuing and continuing until such time when Germany says we are now putting a stamp on the genocide and the effects of what we caused. That is my answer to question one. The second question is as to whether we have a plan in Botswana or in the diaspora. Yes, we do have a plan. You know, they say if we are failing to plan, then we are planning to fail. We have so far, you know, we have an organization called Botswana Society for Nama, the Ovaherero, and Ovambandero. This is the very organization that about 3 months ago handed a petition against the Republic, the Federal Republic of Germany, through their embassy in Gaborone, Botswana, after hearing and learning that Namibia has nothing and has distanced itself from collaboration with other former colonial victims of the genocide. So we have a plan in place. Thank you so very much, Sekazanduli.
Thank you for that. Yeah, sis, before you come in, now, if the order hasn't been rescinded, does that mean when we look at the principles of reparations, like the promise or the guarantee of non-repetition, does that mean that is still an open case?
It is an open case. It is an open case because you stop the case when the effects of that particular order or that particular initiation has been halted. But if the results continue to go on and on and on and on, obviously those results are going on in furtherance of what we initiated. So the orders are still on because we are material effects and evidence of that particular order or orders, if I may say.
So that's why it is so dangerous to jump onto the joint declaration. While, for instance, the non-repetition, guarantee of non-repetition has been, you know, brushed aside. So all this poses a danger to the whole victim communities. And that's why we have to be very clear in the beginning that this is what we want and we should not budge for a minute.
Absolutely. And I will just add that the first aspect of an authentic repair process or reparative justice process is what's called, and it goes with the guarantees of non-repetition, it's called a cessation of violations in law, meaning we say stop the harm, stop the maangamizi. You can't be repairing when the harm is still continuing. And just like you have Aboriginal people and Indigenous peoples of the Americas who have been petitioning for a revocation of the papal bulls and the doctrine of discovery, which actually has legitimized conquest. And in Africa, the whole fact that even within this agreement, it's allowing setting aside a certain amount in the joint declaration to fund land reform on the basis of willing buyer, willing seller. So that's the same doctrine of discovery that is in effect in Africa that has never been rescinded. And so what it does, it gets baked into the so-called legal systems, and there is a perpetration in continuity, right, of this harm. The legal system itself has reinforced conquest. There must be a repair of the law, even the legal institutions and mechanisms, okay? And that's not happened. So that should be on the table. That must be revoked, because if it's not revoked, it means that's part of why the government of Germany is not even recognizing that you're full human beings. That's why you're being treated like this. They're saying they don't want to negotiate or recognize affected communities as a third party, as it were, or a party to the negotiations. But yet they did that in the case of the Jewish people. They didn't just negotiate with the emerging state of Israel. They negotiated with the Jewish Claims Conference, which was a worldwide body of Jewish people in the diaspora. So why, and this was back then, decades and decades ago, why was it okay to do that for white folk or people racialized as white? Because we know that Jews are not just white, but in that case it was. But it's not okay to do that for you all. It's the same mentality that says you are not yet human. You are not fully human, and we don't recognize your human rights because you've not even rehabilitated your own humanity and your own dignity. Until we ourselves stand up and we repair and restore our dignity, then we are going to keep being dealt with in the way that we are being dealt with, and you will be dealt with in the way that you are being dealt with. So this is where agency, your own agency as affected communities, is an essential part of the rehabilitation process. And that's the harm we do when we just focus on a finite amount of funds, which could be totally meaningless within 5 years' time from now, the way how the economic system works. That's the harm that we continue to do. And so the power, we don't realize it, but the power is and has always been in our hands. And it's because of that power why our oppressors, historic and contemporary ones, have always sought to attack the foundations of our humanity, which is our culture, because that is what tells you, you know, your political and cultural time of day. It's your culture. It's what tells you what is acceptable. What are the standards that we should be living by? How is it that other people should treat us? And until we restore that, we will continue to be treated as dehumanized peoples.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Esther. Thank you, Esther.
Yeah. Can I come here, moderator?
Mr. Hengari, yes, please. Yes, please.
Maybe it's Hangero, or is it me?
No, go on. Is that Stallone?
No, yeah, Mr. Moderator, thank you so much. I think I just want to echo those sentiments, that the continued effects of the external order that are being felt, that is what we are really painting here, of the loss of cultural rights, the loss of cultural possessions and grounding of our children that cannot speak our languages, and so forth and so forth. But I want also to just say that it's also very, very important that we are very careful how we treat this issue. And that's why I wanted to I could not emphasize it enough, that it can be treated as an ordinary issue. And if we keep on shifting positions to please our masters at any point, we are actually doing more damage, and we are actually contributing and supporting that whole thing of the genocide. Because and I think that is why the late Kadenambo, and may his soul continue to rest in peace, he used to say this, that one thing that we must always be careful is whatever we are doing right now, we need to guard against continuously supporting the genocide from continuing, and because anybody who is doing what they are doing that supports and perpetuates genocide actions and effects is actually can be subpoenaed or called to order at international levels, and I think that is what we need to actually guard against. And I think
the whole thing of what we have gone through really, and I want to echo something around unity. We need to come together when we're dealing with this issue. We need to be united and be one and speaking the same narrative, so that we are not actually being used as punching bags, being divided, that each one has to stand on their own. The Banderos are on their own there, the Wahereros are there, the Namas are on their own here. We need to find the power of collaboration and move together. And that's going to be very, very effective in us being able to win this battle. Otherwise, if we continue to allow ourselves, because of our political allegiance, because I belong to that party and must speak the language that they are speaking, unfortunately, we are falling into the trap of advancing what has really happened in the extermination order, that now it continues to be felt even in modern day Namibia. I thank you.
Sandy, before anybody else comes in, I would like to echo this, that there's been some progress insofar as we are concerned in Botswana, that we saw that dichotomy, we saw that aridity of unison and collaboration, and we eventually came up with a society called Botswana Society for the Nama of Mbandero. And this, I think, is a very, very fertile gesture in us pulling our sources and our efforts together. And that is the program and the model around and upon which we are working in Botswana. So I think, and I've always had a problem with my brethren in Namibia, which is motherland, that they should emulate what we are doing in the diaspora, especially with regard to efforts of unity and initiatives of unity. So once we come together, obviously we will cease to be a laughingstock, by our perpetrators. And people, our perpetrators currently are capitalizing on the dichotomy and the differences that we have among ourselves. And I think, as we are saying, this is the only thing that we can do in order for us to now, bridge those kind of, of eventualities and act in unison and collaboration. Thank you so very much, Sandy. I like that.
Yeah.
That interactive part of our program for this afternoon or evening. In concluding, I want to thank our panelists, but before I do that, or in the process of doing that, what are some of the lessons that we are taking of this? One emphasis was put on the need for us to unite. In that unity, we were informed and told that, particularly by our sister Esther, the struggle that we are waging can be much more easier, probably much more effective, if we broaden it by internationalizing it, if we can, take it to off the shores of the other countries, take it outside Namibia, take it to the Caribbean, take it to wherever. It is a human rights and humanitarian rights issue. It did affect us directly, but it is not the first and the only. It might be the first of the 21st century, as you say, but it is not the only. It would gain traction, momentum, and meaning, because what we do here would also become a lesson to others. So we must take that and broaden our scope and our approach as we move forward. Let me once again thank our panelists. Your time is valuable. We know that time is money. As a civil society organization, we don't have any honorarium to give, but I think it is worth the reward that you get out of this, knowing fully that what you said today did not only end in these four corners of this little room, but through technology it went across and over. And most people, some of them who would not have had any knowledge about this issue or about what we are dealing with in Namibia, specifically for the Ovaherero, Mbaderu and Namas, and those that were affected through this, and also the challenges that we are facing. I think tonight, John and Esther and the other colleagues, we tried to highlight why what we have in the joint declaration falls far short of the, in terms of the enormity of what is at stake and what needs to be addressed. This is a message that I think, however insignificant it might sound, I'm sure it will find some resonance somewhere, even within the polity of our state. So with that, let me thank you and thank you all. Thank to our brother who facilitated this new way of communicating. Your time and effort made this possible. Thank you once more and good night.